The great hall of Valdren Keep fell silent as the Alpha King lifted the quill. Cale Thornwood had not seen daylight in 7 years. The curse that had stolen his sight had also stolen his throne, his pack's respect, and any hope of finding his fated mate. Now, at 32, he was signing a marriage contract to a woman he would never see, a political alliance to save his crumbling kingdom from the wolves circling its borders. "Your Majesty," his advisor Brennan whispered urgently, "perhaps we should wait. The delegation from the east. We'll tear through our villages by winter's end if I don't secure this alliance today." Cale's voice was rough, unused to argument. His sightless eyes, once the color of molten amber, now held only pale mist. "Read me the terms again." Brennan cleared his throat. "Lord Viezrin of House Amory offers his eldest daughter, Celestine, in marriage. In exchange, you provide military protection for their southern territories and—" "I don't care about territories." Cale pressed the quill to parchment, feeling for the line Brennan had marked with a ridge of wax. "Does she agree to the match?" A pause. "The Lady Celestine has accepted her duty. Duty. Not desire, not even tolerance." Kyle almost laughed. What woman would desire a blind king whose own wolf had gone silent, dormant within him like a beast in endless hibernation? He signed his name in the darkness that had become his world. "It's done," Brennan announced. "The wedding will take place at tomorrow's moonrise." Cale nodded, already retreating into the numbness that had protected him these 7 years. He would have a wife, a political ornament. Perhaps an heir, if she could stomach his touch. He expected nothing more. He certainly did not expect what walked through his doors the following evening. The ceremony was held in the keep's ancient stone chapel, lit by 1,000 candles whose warmth Cale could feel but never see. He stood at the altar in ceremonial black, his scarred hands clasped before him, listening to the rustle of his pack assembling in the pews. They whispered, of course, they always whispered. "The blind king finally takes a bride. Poor woman, sacrificed to a broken alpha. His wolf hasn't stirred in 7 years. He's barely more than human now." Cale let their words wash over him. He had long stopped caring what they thought. Then the chapel doors opened. He heard the collective intake of breath before he registered anything else. The whispers died instantly, replaced by a silence so profound he could hear his own heartbeat. Footsteps. Light. Hesitant. The soft brush of fabric against stone. And then Cale's world exploded. It started as a tremor deep in his chest, a stirring in the place where his wolf had slumbered for so long. The beast rose with a roar that echoed through every fiber of his being, slamming against the walls of his consciousness with desperate, clawing need. Mate. The word tore through him like lightning. His knees buckled. The mighty Alpha King, who had faced assassins and wars and the curse that stole his sight without flinching, nearly collapsed before his entire court. "Your Majesty?" Brennan's alarmed voice came from somewhere distant. But Cale couldn't respond. His wolf was howling, thrashing, weeping with a joy so fierce it bordered on agony. Every instinct screamed at him to move, to claim, to find the source of the scent now flooding his senses. Honeysuckle and moonlight, rain on warm stone, something ancient and wild and unmistakably his. "Who?" Cale rasped, his voice barely human. "Who just entered this chapel?" The footsteps had stopped. He could hear rapid breathing now, a racing heartbeat that somehow synchronized with his own. "Your Majesty," Brennan said carefully, "it is your bride." Cale's hands trembled at his sides. "Describe her." "Sire, the ceremony." "Describe her." The command resonated with an alpha's power he hadn't wielded in years. Brennan swallowed audibly. She is not Lady Celestine, Your Majesty." The chapel erupted in shocked murmurs. Cale heard Lord Vesrin's blustering protests from somewhere to his left, heard words like substitute and younger daughter and unfortunate necessity. But none of it mattered. None of it mattered because his wolf was on its knees inside him, whimpering with desperate devotion toward the woman frozen halfway down the aisle. "Her name?" Cale demanded. "What is her name?" A voice answered, not Brennan's, not Lord Vesrin's, but hers. Soft, frightened, yet threaded with steel. "Sarah. My name is Sarah Amory, and I'm sorry, Your Majesty, but my sister fled in the night. They sent me in her place." Sarah had known this was a death sentence the moment her father shoved her into the carriage. "You will take Celestine's place," Lord Vesrin had commanded, his face purple with rage and shame. "You will tell no one of your sister's cowardice. You will marry the blind king, and you will keep our alliance intact. Or so help me, Sarah, I will destroy what little remains of your mother's legacy." Her mother's garden. The only place in House Amory where Sarah had ever felt safe. The wild roses her mother had cultivated. The herbs that whispered secrets when Sarah touched them. Her father knew that threatening it was the one leverage he had. So Sarah had gone. She had donned her sister's wedding gown, a confection of silk and pearls that hung loose on her smaller frame. She had climbed into the carriage meant for Celestine and ridden through the night toward Valdrin Keep. Toward a king everyone said was more beast than man. What she had not expected was the beast to look at her like that. The Alpha King couldn't see her. Everyone knew the curse had taken his eyes. Yet when she entered that chapel, his entire body had turned toward her with the precision of a predator scenting prey. His face, half hidden by the dark hair that fell across his brow, had transformed from cold resignation to something raw and hungry. And when his knees had buckled, Sarah still couldn't understand what had happened, couldn't understand why this powerful king had nearly fallen before her, why his voice had cracked when he demanded her name. Now she stood in the chamber they had given her, still wearing her sister's ill-fitting gown, staring at the moonlight pooling on ancient stone floors. The room was finer than anything she had ever known: velvet curtains, a four-poster bed, a fire crackling in the hearth. But it felt like a gilded cage. The wedding had not proceeded. After Sarah's revelation, chaos had erupted. Lord Vesrin had tried to salvage the alliance by insisting Sarah was just as suitable as Celestine. The king's advisor had demanded explanations, and the king himself. The king had said nothing. He had simply stood there, trembling, his scarred hands clenched into fists, while his court swirled with arguments around him. Then, without a word, he had turned and walked out of the chapel. That had been 3 hours ago. A knock at her door made Sarah flinch. She composed herself quickly. Years of surviving her father's household had taught her to hide fear, and called out, "Enter!" It was not a servant who stepped through the door. It was the king himself. Sarah's breath caught. He moved differently than she expected for a blind man, confident, precise, as if he could see obstacles before they appeared. His ceremonial coat was gone, leaving him in a simple black shirt that stretched across broad shoulders. This close, she could see the scars that traced his forearms, the hard line of his jaw, the pale mist of his ruined eyes. He was younger than she had imagined. And despite everything, despite the blindness and the scars and the curse everyone whispered about, he was devastatingly handsome. "You're afraid," he said. Not a question. Sarah lifted her chin. "Should I not be? I've been traded like livestock and delivered to a stranger who nearly collapsed at the sight of me." She stopped. "Forgive me. That was thoughtless." "At the scent of you," he corrected quietly. "I cannot see you, Sarah Amory, but I know you're standing by the window because your heartbeat echoes differently against the glass. I know you haven't eaten today because your stomach has growled twice since I entered. And I know you're terrified because your scent has shifted from honeysuckle to something sharper. Fear smells like copper." Sarah pressed her back against the cold window. "What do you want?" The king was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he lowered himself to one knee before her. Sarah stared in shock. A king, kneeling, before her. I want to apologize, he said roughly. For what happened in the chapel, for frightening you. His jaw tightened. My wolf. I thought he was dead. Years of silence, years of nothing. And then you walked in and he... Kyle stopped, shaking his head. He what? Sarah whispered. Those pale, sightless eyes lifted toward her face with uncanny accuracy. He recognized you, as something I never dared hope to find. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. I don't understand. Neither do I. Kale rose fluidly to his feet. The marriage contract was signed with your sister's name. Legally, I cannot hold you to it. You're free to leave at dawn if you wish. I'll provide safe escort anywhere you want to go. Freedom. He was offering her freedom. Sarah thought of her father's threats, her mother's garden, and the life of quiet misery waiting for her back at House Amory. Then she thought of the way this scarred king had knelt before her, not to propose, not to demand, but to apologize. And if I stay? She heard herself ask. Kale went very still. Then we negotiate new terms. A real agreement, not one built on your sister's cowardice and your father's schemes. His voice roughened. I won't force you into anything, Sarah, but I won't pretend I don't want you to stay. He turned and walked toward the door with that same unsettling precision. Your Majesty, Sarah called out. He paused. Your wolf, she said softly. What did he recognize me as? Kale's hand tightened on the door frame. When he answered, his voice was barely audible. Mine. Sarah should have run. Every rational thought told her to take the king's offer and flee at dawn. Return to House Amory, face her father's wrath, and forget this strange night had ever happened. Instead, she found herself wandering the castle gardens as the moon rose higher. Valdrin Keep was ancient, its stones worn smooth by centuries of wind and rain. But the gardens were wild. Overgrown hedges formed labyrinthine paths. Roses climbed crumbling walls with thorny abandon. Night-blooming jasmine spilled its intoxicating perfume into the darkness. It reminded her achingly of her mother's sanctuary. Sarah paused beside a fountain that had long stopped flowing, its basin filled with rainwater and fallen petals. She trailed her fingers through the cool water, and something stirred inside her. She had never told anyone about the whispers. Since childhood, Sarah had heard them, soft voices in growing things, secrets carried on root and stem. Her mother had shared the gift before illness claimed her. Our bloodline is old, she had told young Sarah. Older than the wolf packs, older than the kingdoms. We were the ones who spoke to the earth when the world was young. Keep it hidden, my darling, keep it safe. Sarah had kept it hidden. But here, alone in this wild garden, she let her guard slip. She pressed her palm flat against the trunk of an ancient oak and listened. The tree's voice was deep, slow, and patient. He comes, it murmured. The broken king. He comes for you. Sarah snatched her hand back just as footsteps crunched on the gravel path behind her. You found my mother's garden. She spun to find Kale emerging from the shadows between hedges. Moonlight silvered his dark hair and caught the scars on his hands as he moved toward her with that uncanny awareness. Your mother's? Sarah asked. She planted most of these roses before she died. Said they reminded her of the old country. A ghost of something like grief flickered across his features. I used to spend hours here as a boy. Before the curse, I could see them bloom every spring. Sarah's chest tightened with unexpected sympathy. I'm sorry. Don't be. I've made my peace with darkness. He tilted his head, that predator's attention fixing on her again. You didn't leave. No. Why? Sarah hesitated. The truth was complicated. Fear of her father, curiosity about the king's strange reaction, the inexplicable pull she felt toward this broken man she barely knew. I don't know yet, she admitted. Kale nodded slowly, as if her honesty satisfied him more than any crafted answer. May I show you something? Before Sarah could respond, a howl split the night. Long, mournful, and close. She tensed, but Kale only turned his head toward the sound with something like recognition. They're restless tonight. They? The pack. Wolves run these grounds freely after dark. They sense— He paused. They sense change coming. Another howl answered the first, then another, until the night sang with their voices. Sarah should have been afraid. Instead, she felt something stir in her blood, an ancient response to a call she didn't understand. "You're not frightened," Kale observed. "Should I be?" "Most humans are terrified of wolves." Sarah looked at him directly, though he couldn't see it. "I grew up in a house full of monsters who wore human faces. Wolves are honest about what they are." Something shifted in Kale's expression. Surprise, then approval, then something deeper that made Sarah's pulse quicken. "Come with me," he said. He offered his hand. Sarah stared at those scarred fingers, knowing that taking them would be another step away from the safety of distance. She took them anyway. His grip was warm and firm as he led her deeper into the garden, navigating the overgrown paths with impossible certainty. The wolves' howling grew louder, surrounding them in a symphony of wild music. Then the path opened into a clearing, and Sarah gasped. Dozens of wolves filled the moonlit space, silver and gray and black, their eyes gleaming like scattered stars. They were massive, far larger than any natural wolf. Sarah's hand tightened on Kale's. "Don't be afraid," he murmured. "They won't hurt you." The largest wolf, its fur the deep gray of storm clouds, rose and padded toward them. Its golden eyes fixed not on Kale, but on Sarah. She held her breath as the massive creature stopped directly before her. It was close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from its body. Then, slowly, the wolf lowered itself to the ground. It pressed its great head to the earth at Sarah's feet and let out a soft, keening whine. "Impossible," Kyle breathed. "What's happening?" Sarah whispered. "That's Torin, my pack's eldest wolf. He hasn't submitted to anyone since my father died." Kale's voice was strained with disbelief. "He's bowing to you, Sarah. They're all—" Sarah looked up. Every wolf in the clearing had followed Torin's lead. Dozens of massive bodies lowered to the ground, heads bowed toward her in unmistakable submission. "What am I?" Sarah breathed, her voice trembling. Kale's hand found her face in the darkness, his calloused palm cupping her cheek with devastating gentleness. When he spoke, his voice was rough with wonder. "I don't know, but I intend to find out." In the days that followed, Sarah learned the rhythms of Valdrin Keep. The king rose before dawn and trained in the courtyard despite his blindness. His advisor Brennan was fiercely protective and deeply suspicious of her. The servants whispered constantly about the wolves' strange behavior and the king's changed demeanor. What she couldn't learn was what was happening between herself and Kale. Every day, he sought her out. In the gardens, walking in companionable silence. In the library, where he asked her to read aloud. At meals, where his questions slowly chipped away at her walls. "Tell me about your mother," he said one evening. Sarah's throat tightened. She was kind. She loved growing things. Had a gift for it. Our garden was beautiful before she died. Before your father let it decay. It wasn't a question. He hurt you. Not with his fists. There are worse weapons than fists. Sarah set down her fork. "Why do you care? I'm just a substitute bride." "You stopped being a substitute the moment you walked into that chapel." Kyle rose and moved toward her. "For years, I've been hollow. My wolf retreated so far inside me that I forgot what it felt like to have him there. Then you appeared and he woke. He recognized you as something essential." "As your mate," Sarah whispered. "As my mate." The word hung between them. "Among my kind, a fated mate is sacred. The other half of our soul. Most wolves never find theirs." His hand found her shoulder. "I had given up hope." Sarah's heart raced. "And if your wolf made a mistake?" "Wolves don't make mistakes about mates." "But I'm human." "Are you?" His thumb brushed her jaw. The wolves in that clearing didn't bow to a human, they bowed to something old. Sarah's heart skipped. Her mother's words echoed in her memory. Before she could respond, a commotion erupted in the corridor. Shouting voices, running footsteps. Cale moved instantly, placing himself between Sarah and the door. It burst open. "Your Majesty!" Brennan stumbled in. "Riders from the east. 300 at least. Flying Lord Kaelin's banner." Cale's hands clenched. "My cousin. The one who tried to claim my throne after the curse. He says the marriage contract was fraudulent. He's calling it grounds for war." The blood drained from Sarah's face. "I should go. If I leave." "No." Cale turned toward her. "You're not going anywhere. Kaelin has wanted my throne for years. You're just an excuse." He took her hands. "Whatever happens, you stay in this castle. Promise me." "I promise," she whispered. He lifted her hands to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "Brennan, summon the War Council. And there's something else." Brennan's voice went strange. "Lord Kaelin has brought someone. Lady Celestine." Sarah's world tilted. Celestine, the bride who had fled. Cale's expression shuddered closed. "Then we'll finally learn who I truly married." He walked out without looking back. Sarah stood frozen, her hands tingling from his kiss, her heart cracking along fault lines she hadn't known existed. Whatever Celestine had come to claim, Sarah would not surrender without a fight. 3 days passed in agonizing silence. Kyle had not come to see her. Sarah took her food alone, listening to war preparations, hammers on steel, commanders drilling soldiers, hooves thundering through the gates. And beneath it all, the howling of wolves. They sang every night now. Sarah would stand at her window watching their silver shapes, feeling an inexplicable pull toward them. But it was Cale she ached for. The absence of him was physical, a hollow space beneath her ribs that grew more painful with each hour. She listened for his footsteps, turned toward every opening door. "This is madness," she told herself. "You've known him less than a week." But her heart refused to listen. On the 3rd night she crept to the gardens and pressed her palm to the ancient oak. "He suffers," the tree whispered. "The wounded king denies himself what his wolf craves." "Why?" "Guilt. Fear. The sister comes. He believes he must let you go." Tears burned in Sarah's eyes. He was suffering for her, trying to give her freedom even as it destroyed him. "Where is he?" "The North Tower. He goes there when the pain grows too great." Sarah ran. The North Tower was the oldest part of Valdrin Keep. Sarah climbed the spiraling stairs with her heart pounding, knowing only that she couldn't bear another moment of distance. The door at the top stood slightly ajar. She pushed it open and found Cale standing at the tower's edge, his hands gripping the battlements, his face tilted toward a sky he couldn't see. "You shouldn't be here." "Neither should you," Sarah replied, standing at the edge of a tower in the dark. A sound escaped him, not quite a laugh, not quite a sob. "My wolf would never let me fall." "Is that what you wish? For him to be silent again?" "I wish I could stop feeling you every moment of every day." He turned toward her, and she gasped at his haggard face. "My wolf knows where you are every second. The bond pulls at me like a hook in my chest." "Then why do you stay away?" "Because you deserve better. You were traded like property, bound to a broken king who cannot even look upon your face." "Cale, Celestine arrives tomorrow. I will dissolve whatever claim exists between us. You will be free." "And if I don't want to be free?" He went utterly still. "I know exactly what I'm saying," Sarah continued, cupping his face in her hands. "I have spent my entire life being invisible. Then I walked into your chapel, and someone saw me. I can't see anything. You see me. You knew I was afraid before I spoke. You see me more clearly than anyone with perfect vision ever has." His hands covered hers, trembling. "The bond. is not the reason I'm here. I'm here because when you knelt before me and apologized, no one had ever treated me with such respect. Because somewhere in these past days, I stopped being a substitute and started being someone falling in love with you. A raw sound tore from his throat. His arms came around her with crushing force. You cannot love me, he said into her hair. The curse, the war. Let it come. I'm not running. For a long moment they held each other. Then he pulled back to frame her face in his hands. If you stay, I cannot promise I will be able to let you go. Then I'll be yours. Truly yours. His thumb traced her jaw to the sensitive spot where her neck met her shoulder. She shivered. Not yet, he murmured. Not until you understand what you're choosing. A horn shattered the night. Cale's head snapped toward the sound. That's the Eastern Watchtower. They've arrived early. He grabbed her hand. Stay in your chambers. Bar the door. Promise me. I promise. He lifted her hand, pressed a fierce kiss to her palm, and was gone. Sarah stood alone, her palm burning where his lips had touched. Tomorrow would bring her sister. Tomorrow would bring war. But tonight, she had made her choice. The great hall had been transformed. Torches blazed along the walls. Warriors lined the perimeter in full armor. At the far end, Cale sat upon the throne, his scarred hands gripping the armrests. Sarah watched from the gallery above, hidden among the shadows. She had promised to stay in her chambers, but she couldn't bear not knowing. The doors swung open. Lord Calen entered first, tall, sharp-featured, cold gray eyes sweeping the hall. Behind him came soldiers, and behind them, her golden hair gleaming, walked Celestine. Celestine was exactly as Sarah remembered. Beautiful, poised. Her gown was silk and sapphires, her face serene. She looks like a queen, Sarah thought. Lord Calen. Cale's voice echoed cold as winter steel. You've brought an army to my doorstep. Calen smiled. Cousin, I've come to right a wrong. Your marriage was conducted under fraudulent circumstances, a substitute instead of the promised bride. I propose a simple solution. Dissolve the fraudulent marriage, wed Lady Celestine as intended, and name me as regent to handle matters requiring sight. The hall erupted in whispers. Regent. Calen wanted to rule through Cale. And if I refuse? Then I petition the High Council to remove you entirely, a blind alpha who cannot identify his own bride. They'll see reason. Silence fell. Then Celestine stepped forward. Your Majesty, I apologize for my absence. I was unwell. But I am here now, ready to fulfill my duty. Sarah watched her sister perform and felt something harden inside her. Lady Celestine, Cale said, his voice unreadable. We will discuss terms in the morning. As the hall emptied, Sarah fled to her chamber. She had barely closed the door when a knock came. Not Cale, Celestine. Her sister swept in without invitation. So this is where they've been keeping you? Celestine, I didn't expect... Did you really think you could take my place? Celestine's smile didn't reach her eyes. Lord Calen has promised me a crown. Once he controls the regency, I'll have more power than any queen. Understanding dawned. You planned this. You ran knowing father would send me. You were always so easy to manipulate. Celestine moved closer. Did you really think anyone would choose you over me? Cale. We'll do what's politically necessary. Once he understands marrying me prevents civil war, he'll set you aside. Celestine reached the door. Enjoy your last night in the castle, little sister. Tomorrow, you go back to being nothing. The door closed. Sarah sank onto her bed, her sister's poison spreading through her veins. Was Celestine right? Outside her window, the wolves had gone silent. She had never felt more alone. Morning came gray and cold, heavy clouds obscuring the sun. Sarah had not slept. She had spent the night alternating between rage and despair, between certainty that Cale would choose her and terror that he wouldn't. By dawn, she had made a decision. She would not wait to be set aside like an inconvenient mistake. She would go to Kale herself, demand answers, fight for what they had found together. But when she opened her chamber door, 2 guards stood blocking her path. Lady Sarah, one of them, a grizzled veteran with silver at his temples, spoke apologetically. "We have orders. You're to remain in your chambers until the matter of the marriage is settled." "Whose orders?" The guard's expression flickered with something that might have been sympathy. "The king's." Sarah felt the words like a physical blow. Kale had ordered her confined, locked away while he decided her fate with Celestine and Kaelin. "I need to see him," she said, hating the way her voice trembled. "I'm sorry, my lady. Our orders are clear." The door closed in her face. Hours passed in suffocating silence. Sarah paced her chamber like a caged animal, her mother's gift burning beneath her skin with restless energy. She pressed her hands to the walls, to the wooden furniture, to anything that might carry a whisper of what was happening beyond her prison. But stone held no voice, and dead wood offered no comfort. It was midday when she felt it. A sudden flare of wrongness that made her gasp aloud. Pain. Not her own pain, but someone else's, flooding through the aching void in her chest where the bond resided. Kale's pain, sharp and desperate and terrified. Something's wrong. Sarah ran to her door and pounded against the wood. "Let me out! Something's happened to the king!" Silence from the other side. She slammed her fists against the door until her hands ached, screaming for someone to listen, but no response came. Either the guards had been ordered to ignore her, or they had been called away to whatever catastrophe was unfolding. "Think," Sarah commanded herself. "Think." Her eyes fell on the window. It was narrow, barely wide enough for her shoulders, and the drop below was 3 stories to the garden. But Sarah remembered the ancient oak outside, its branches reaching toward the castle walls. She remembered her mother's words about their gift. Sarah climbed onto the windowsill and reached toward the nearest branch, calling to it with everything she had. "Please, please, help me." For a moment, nothing happened. Then the branch began to move. It stretched toward her like a living thing. Sarah grabbed hold as it reached her window, and the oak wrapped smaller branches around her arms, lowering her gently until her feet touched solid ground. "Thank you," Sarah breathed. "Hurry," the oak whispered. "The king bleeds." Sarah ran. She followed the pull of the bond through the castle grounds, past startled servants and shouting guards, until she burst through the doors of the great hall. And stopped dead. Kale lay crumpled at the base of his throne, blood pooling beneath him from a wound in his side. Brennan knelt beside him, pressing cloth to the injury, his face white with fear. Standing over them both, a bloody dagger in his hand, was Kaelin. "Ah, the substitute arrives." Kaelin's smile was triumphant. "Just in time to watch your beloved king die." Sarah couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The sight of Kale's blood spreading across the stones had frozen her solid. "He refused, you see." Kaelin wiped his blade casually on a silk handkerchief. "Refused to set you aside, refused to name me regent, refused to see reason." He shook his head in mock sorrow. "So unfortunate. The blind king, murdered by assassins in his own hall, and I, his grieving cousin, forced to take the throne to maintain order." "You'll never get away with this," Brennan snarled. "Who will stop me? The wolves?" Kaelin laughed. "They can't even enter the hall. I had my men line the entrances with wolfsbane. And as for the rest of the pack?" He gestured toward the windows, where Sarah could see silver shapes throwing themselves against an invisible barrier, howling with frustrated rage. "They'll watch their alpha die, and then they'll submit to whoever proves strongest." Sarah's paralysis broke. She ran toward Kale, dropping to her knees beside him, her hands finding his face. "Kale," she gasped. "Kale, please." His eyes fluttered open, sightless, pain-glazed but somehow finding her anyway. "Sarah." Her name was a ragged whisper. "You should have stayed in your room." And let you die alone? Never. A weak laugh escaped him, followed by a cough that brought blood to his lips. Stubborn woman. You're stubborn woman, she corrected fiercely. Kaylin's boots appeared in her peripheral vision. How touching. But I'm afraid your romance ends here. Substitute. Sarah looked up at the man who had destroyed everything, and something ancient and furious rose up inside her. My name, she said quietly, is Sarah. She pressed her hands flat against the stone floor, stone that had once been part of the living earth, stone that still remembered what it had been, and she called. The response was immediate and catastrophic. Vines erupted through cracks in the floor, thick as a man's arm, moving with impossible speed. They wrapped around Kaylin's legs, his arms, his throat, lifting him off the ground as he screamed. What? What are you? Something old, Sarah said, rising to her feet as power flooded through her veins. Something your poison couldn't keep out. She turned to the doorways where Wolfsbane blocked the pack's entry and raised her hand. The poisonous plants withered and died at her command, crumbling to dust. The wolves poured in like a silver flood. Kaylin's soldiers tried to flee, but the pack was faster. Within moments, the hall was secure, the conspirators subdued, and Torin, the great gray wolf who had bowed to her in the clearing, stood guard over Kaylin's vine-wrapped body. Sarah dropped back to her knees beside Kale, her power fading as quickly as it had come. Brennan, we need a healer. No. Kale's bloody hand found hers. You. It has to be you. I don't know how. You do. His fingers tightened on hers with desperate strength. I felt it, Sarah. When you called the vines. You have healing in you too. I know you do. Sarah's hands trembled as she pressed them to his wound. She thought of her mother, of the gardens that had always responded to her touch, of the gift she had hidden her entire life. Our bloodline is old. She closed her eyes and reached for that ancient power once more. Not to destroy this time, but to heal. Golden light bloomed beneath her palms. Warmth spread through her fingers, into Kale's torn flesh, seeking out the damage and trying to mend it. But even as she poured everything she had into him, she could feel his life force slipping away. The golden light poured from Sarah's hands like liquid sunlight. The power moved through her and into Kale, seeking out the damage, knitting torn flesh. But something was wrong. The wound was closing, yet Kale's heartbeat grew weaker, not stronger. His breathing became shallow, rattling in his chest like stones in an empty vessel. It's not enough, Sarah gasped. Brennan. The blade was poisoned. Brennan's voice was hollow with despair. Your healing is fighting the wound, but the poison is still spreading through his blood. Sarah pushed more power into him, drawing from reserves she didn't know she had. Still his life force flickered like a candle in a hurricane, guttering toward darkness. No, I won't lose him. Not now. Not after everything we've survived to find each other. There has to be something else, she said desperately. Some way to save him. The bond. The word came from Torin, except it wasn't Torin anymore. Where the great gray wolf had stood, a silver-haired man now crouched, his golden eyes filled with knowing. The mate bond, Torin continued. It is incomplete between you. If you complete it now, your life forces will merge. Your strength will become his. It may be enough to burn the poison from his blood. How? Sarah demanded. You must claim him as he would have claimed you. The bite. The mark. The binding of souls. Sarah's hand flew to her throat. If I do this, what happens to me? You will be his, and he will be yours. Forever. There is no undoing a completed bond. Torin's expression softened. His pain will be your pain, his joy, your joy. You will never be alone again, but you will never be only yourself again either. Sarah looked down at Kyle's ashen face. His lips had gone blue. His heartbeat was barely a whisper now. She thought of all the reasons she should hesitate. They had shared only days together. She didn't fully understand what completing this bond would mean, but when she searched her heart, she found no doubt, only certainty, bright and blazing. "I choose him," she said. "I choose us." She leaned down, her hair falling around them like a curtain, blocking out everything except the man beneath her. "Kyle," she whispered against his ear, "I need you to hold on." His eyes fluttered. Those beautiful, ruined eyes that had never seen her face but had seen her soul more clearly than anyone. "Sarah." Her name was barely a breath. "You should let me go." "Never." She pressed her forehead to his. "You told me wolves don't make mistakes about mates. Well, I'm choosing you. Now and forever." "I don't understand." "You will." Sarah looked at the place where his neck met his shoulder, the same spot he had traced on her skin. She lowered her mouth to that spot and breathed in his scent one last time. Pine and winter frost. Home. Then she bit down. The world shattered. Sarah had thought she understood connection. She had spoken to trees, felt the whispers of growing things, and sensed the faint echo of Kale's emotions through their incomplete bond. But nothing had prepared her for this. Kale's consciousness crashed into hers like a tidal wave. She felt everything he was, everything he had ever been. The boy who had lost his mother too young, the young alpha who had shouldered a kingdom's weight before he was ready, the man who had spent 7 years in darkness, convinced he would never be whole again. She felt his love for her, staggering in its intensity. Not the gentle affection of courtship, but something primal and absolute. A force of nature that had recognized its other half the moment she walked into that chapel. And she felt his wolf. The beast rose to meet her with pure, overwhelming joy. He had waited so long, searched so long, and now, finally, his mate had claimed him. "Ours," the wolf howled through their shared consciousness. "She is ours and we are hers." Golden light exploded outward from where Sarah's teeth had broken Kale's skin. It swept through the great hall like a sunrise, burning away shadows, purifying everything it touched. Where it met the poison in Kale's blood, the darkness simply dissolved, unable to withstand the combined force of their merged souls. Sarah felt the moment Kale's heart began to beat strongly again. Felt his lungs fill with air, his blood surge through healing veins. Felt his consciousness sharpen from the fog of death into blazing awareness. Sarah. His voice in her mind was wonder and worship and wild, desperate love. Kale. She lifted her mouth from his throat. The wound she had made was already healing, leaving behind a mark that shimmered faintly gold, a claim visible to any who looked, declaring to the world that the Alpha King belonged to her. Kale's eyes snapped open, and Sarah gasped, because where pale mist had been before, now blazed molten amber, bright and burning and seeing. "Kale," she breathed, "your eyes." His hand came up to cup her face, trembling against her cheek. He was staring at her with an expression of such overwhelming emotion that Sarah felt tears spill down her own cheeks. "I can see you," he whispered. "Sarah, I can see you." She laughed through her tears, joy and relief flooding through her in equal measure. The bond, it must have broken the curse. But she didn't get to finish, because Kale surged up and captured her mouth in a kiss that obliterated every thought in her head. It was fierce and tender and desperate all at once. 7 years of darkness and loneliness poured out of him and into her through the press of his lips. Sarah felt his emotions through their completed bond, disbelief, gratitude, love so vast it seemed to contain universes, and she answered with her own. "I'm here. I'm yours. I'm not going anywhere." When they finally broke apart, both gasping for breath, Sarah became aware of the silence around them. Every wolf in the hall was watching, some still in beast form, others shifted to human, all with expressions of awe. Torin was smiling, his golden eyes bright with unshed tears. "The bond is complete," the ancient wolf announced, his voice carrying through the hall. "The Alpha King has found his true mate, and she has claimed him before us all." A howl rose from one wolf, then another, then dozens more, until the great hall rang with their voices. It was not a sound of mourning or war, but of celebration, of joy, of a pack welcoming its new queen. Kale helped Sarah to her feet, keeping her close against his side. She could feel his strength returning with every passing moment, the bond between them feeding him power even as it fed her his. "You saved me," he said, his amber eyes never leaving her face, drinking in every detail as if he could never look enough. "You claimed me. You gave up everything you were to become mine." "I didn't give up anything." Sarah reached up to touch his cheek, marveling at the way his eyes tracked her movement, at the love written openly across his features. "I gained everything. I gained you." "You gained a kingdom at war," he reminded her gently. "A throne surrounded by enemies. A mate who spent years broken and blind." "I gained a man who knelt before a frightened stranger and offered her freedom," Sarah interrupted. "A king who refused to set me aside even when it meant his death. A wolf who waited in silence for his other half." She rose on her toes and pressed a soft kiss to his lips. "I got the better end of this bargain." Kale's arms tightened around her, and through their bond, she felt the walls he had built around his heart finally, completely crumble. "What did I ever do?" he murmured against her hair. "To deserve you?" "You signed a contract blindly," Sarah answered with a smile, "and your wolf fell to his knees." Kalen's trial was held at dawn the following day. He stood in chains before the assembled court, his arrogance finally stripped away, his face pale with the knowledge of what awaited him. Celestine stood beside him, equally bound, her perfect beauty marred by terror. Kale sat upon his throne with Sarah at his side, not behind him, not below him, but beside him as his equal, his queen, his mate. The mark on his throat gleamed gold in the morning light, a visible declaration of their bond. "Lord Kalen Thornwood," Kale's voice rang through the hall. "You stand accused of attempted assassination and high treason. How do you plead?" Kalen's chin lifted with the last remnants of his pride. "The throne should have been mine. You were broken, blind, unfit to rule. And yet here I sit." Kale's tone was ice. "Healed by my mate, my sight restored by the bond you tried to prevent. You gambled everything on my weakness, cousin. You lost." The sentence was exile, permanent banishment to the frozen wastelands beyond the northern mountains, where Kalen would live out his days far from any throne he might covet. Celestine received the same punishment. When the guards came to lead her away, she turned to Sarah one last time. The venom was gone from her eyes now, replaced by something that might have been regret. "I underestimated you," Celestine said quietly. "The spare, the nothing. I never imagined you could become this." Sarah met her sister's gaze without flinching. "Neither did I. But perhaps that's because you never bothered to look." She watched Celestine disappear through the great doors and felt nothing but relief. That night, Sarah stood in the castle gardens beneath a canopy of stars. The wolves sang in the distance, their voices weaving through the darkness in celebration of their new queen. The ancient oak whispered contentment as she passed, its branches swaying in a wind that touched nothing else. Kale found her by the fountain, as she had known he would. Their bond hummed between them, a constant presence now, warm and golden and infinitely reassuring. "The War Council has agreed to terms," he said, sliding his arms around her from behind. "Kalen's army has disbanded. The Eastern Territories will stand down. For the first time in years, there is peace." Sarah leaned back against his chest, watching the moonlight dance on the water. "And your sight? Is it truly permanent?" "The healers believe so. They think the curse was tied to my wolf's dormancy, and when you claimed us both, when you completed the bond, he pressed a kiss to her hair. You broke more than one chain that day, my heart. My heart. The endearment sent warmth flooding through her. I still don't fully understand what I am, she admitted. The power I wielded, the things I can do. My mother never explained it all before she died. Then we'll discover it together. Cale turned her in his arms so she faced him, his amber eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. Whatever you are, wherever your bloodline leads, I will be beside you. That's what mates do. Sarah smiled up at him. This impossible man who had signed a contract blindly and found his soulmate in a substitute bride. Who had offered her freedom and won her heart instead. Who had nearly died, rather than betray the bond between them. I love you, she said. The first time she had spoken the words aloud since the claiming. Cale's breath caught. Through their bond, she felt the impact of those 3 words hit him like a physical force, felt the last lingering shadows of his self-doubt dissolve in their light. I love you, he answered, his voice rough with emotion. I loved you before I knew your name. I loved you when you were just a scent and a heartbeat in my chapel. I loved you when I was dying, and I will love you until long after I am gone. He kissed her then, deep and slow and thorough, and Sarah melted into him as the wolves sang and the stars wheeled overhead and the ancient oak spread its branches in blessing. She had come to Valdrin Keep as a substitute, a replacement, a nothing. She would remain as its queen. And as Cale lifted her in his arms and carried her toward the castle, toward their future, Sarah knew with absolute certainty that she had finally found where she belonged, not as a spare, not as a substitute, but as the other half of a soul that had been searching for her all along. She was home. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you'd like to listen on the go, all my stories are also available on Spotify. You'll find the link in the description below. A big thank you to everyone who's following. Your support truly means the world to me.